All right. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to PhD 203 Financial Management in Education Institutions. Today, we look at how we, as education leaders, translate our academic vision into fiscal reality. So, allow me to share with you the slides that we will be using in today's presentation. So, give me a few minutes or a few seconds to share with you the slides. So, if there is a delay in the presentation, so kindly bear with us. All right, so I hope the slide is visible already on your screen today. So the topic that we will discuss is the types of budgeting in educational institutions. And this will be presented by my colleagues, by my group mates. It will be started by my presentation, yours truly, Jed Ibete. This will be followed by Ms. Leslie May L. Roble, Giselle B. De Leon, Tirso Jr. T. Pablo, Rhea J. P. Bacatan, Clares P. E. Enriquez, and J. Ann P. Coronacion. These are my group mates, and their names, as you can see, are listed on the screen. In our Philippine setting, think of this as a turning our school improvement plan into an actual working budget. If it is not in the budget, it remains a dream. And if it is funded, then it becomes a priority. So budgeting as a systematic process is not just doing the math or accounting. It is a systematic process. And for us in the Philippines, whether in a public DepEd school or in a private higher education institution, our goal is to ensure that limited funds like our MOOE or otherwise known as maintenance and other operating expenses are used to improve student outcomes while keeping our facilities running. We are balancing the needs of our learners with the reality of our bulsa or our pocket. So, in this morning's discussion, we will be talking about topics such as line item budgeting, performance based budgeting, zero based budgeting, program based budgeting, incremental budgeting, and activity based budgeting. During the last portion of our discussion, ladies and gentlemen, we will also be sharing with you the results of the case study that the group has conducted through one of our members, Ma'am Jayan. All right. So the first topic that I will be or that we will be discussing will be about line item budgeting, and this will be delivered by yours truly. All right. So to lead effectively, we must first master the traditional foundation, and this is the line item budgeting. This is the most common model you will encounter in Philippine government accounting and basic school management. So what is line item budgeting? Think of it as a detailed grocery list. It is the workhorse of school finance because it lists specific categories of expenses, such as salaries, supplies, utilities, with an exact amount next to them. In our context, this is the safety first model. It makes sure that money meant for paper, it isn't accidentally spent on a staff party. How line item budgets are prepared. In the Philippines, we often use incremental budgeting to prepare this list. We look at historical data. What did we spend last year? And if you spend, for example, 50,000 pesos on instructional materials last year, and your enrollment is the same, then 50,000 pesos is your starting point. We assess needs, list the items, and get approval from the school board, or if you are in the Department of Education, the division office, before a single peso is touched. Another question that you might be asking is how line item budgets are implemented. Implementation and the COA mindset, once approved, we enter the control phase. In the Philippines, this is where we align with COA. I hope everybody is familiar with COA or the Commission on Audit. So we align with the standards set by the Commission on Audits or OA. If you have 10,000 pesos, for example, for school supplies, you cannot suddenly use it for travel. without a formal realignment, because originally the budget that I mentioned is for school supplies. So you cannot just suddenly use it for travel purposes. Our finance staff must track every cent to ensure we stay with authorized limits. That's why transparency is a legal mandate here. That's why if you are very familiar with the Ed memos, it is always stated that all expenses must be aligned with the standards set by the Commission on Audit, di ba? Next is the advantages and disadvantages. This is the analytical lens or the pros and cons of line item budgeting. So let us critique this. Advantage, it is simple. Everyone understands a list. It provides tight control. So these are the three advantages. While on the other hand, there are also disadvantages of line item budgeting. It is rigid. If a computer breaks and you didn't budget for repairs this month, you have a problem. More importantly, it focuses on inputs. When we say inputs, this refers to what we bought rather than outcomes or did the students learn. It tells us we bought 50 tablets, but not if those tablets actually improved the NAT scores. So what you can see right now on your screen is an example of FY 2024 school operating budget. So look at this real world artifact. It is an example, a real world example, a school operating budget for fiscal year 2024. Notice the UACS codes. I don't know if it is very clear on your end, but there is actually a UACS codes here. When we say UACS code, it refers to Unified Accounts Code Structure. This is the DNA of Philippine government accounting. So all documents in the Philippines pertaining to accounting bears the UACS because, as I have stated, it is the DNA of Philippine government accounting. See the monthly MOOE programming. We don't just get a lump sum. We program it. So 10,000 for electricity in January, another 10,000 in February. So this prevents us from overspending early in the early running out of life by October. So in conclusion, friends, ladies and gentlemen, to wrap up, line item budgeting is traditional but essential for accountability and compliance. As future PhD leaders, we have to use this structure for its clarity, but complement it with tools that focus on school improvement. Our goal is to ensure that the lines in our budget ultimately lead to the success of our learners. So this ends the first topic, and the next discussion will focus on performance-based budgeting. And to deliver the second topic, let us all welcome on screen Ms. Leslie May L. Roble.
Thank you, Sir
Thank you,
Jed,
Sir Jed,
and good morning
and
to
good morning.
everyone. Today, I will be discussing performance-based budgeting, or also known as the PBB. This discussion will focus on what PBB is, its purpose, and how it is implemented at the school level. First, what is performance-based budgeting? Performance-based budgeting, or PBB, in the school setting refers to a results-oriented budgeting approach that links the allocation of financial resources to measurable educational outcomes, performance indicators, and accountability targets. In the Philippine public schools context, PBB is adopted by DepEd to ensure that school funds such as the MOOE, as well as school-based grants, are strategically allocated based on school needs and performance priorities. These priorities are clearly reflected in the SIP, or the School Improvement Plan, and are operationalized through the AIP, or the Annual Implementation Plan. This ensures that financial resources are invested in programs and activities that directly improve learner outcomes, school effectiveness, and the governance practices. Next will be all about what is the purpose of PBB, or the performance-based budgeting. Okay, the primary purpose of performance-based budgeting is to strengthen accountability and transparency in the use of public funds. Through PBB, schools are required to justify expenditures based on expected outputs and outcomes. Another important purpose is to align school expenditures with DepEd's Basic Education Development Plan or the BEDP, as well as with the school level priorities identified through data and situational analysis. This alignment ensures that funds are used strategically rather than for routine or non-priority expenses. PBB also supports school-based management decentralization by empowering schools to make evidence-based financial decisions. School heads, teachers, and stakeholders become active participants in planning and budgeting. And ultimately, PBB ensures that MOOE directly contributes to learner achievement, access, and equity, particularly for learners who are at risk or disadvantage. Now, how performance-based budgeting is implemented in DepEd. First is situational analysis through school-based management. Schools analyze data such as learner performance, enrollment, attendance, and available resources to identify priority needs and challenges. Second, these identified needs are integrated into the school improvement plan. The SIP serves as the school's long-term roadmap and ensures that only priority programs and interventions are considered for funding. Third, the SIP is operationalized through the annual implementation plan. In the AIP, programs are translated into specific time-bound activities with corresponding budget requirements and performance indicators. Fourth, budget allocation is linked to performance targets. Funds are released and utilized based on expected outputs and outcomes such as improved literacy rates, increased participation, or enhanced teaching effectiveness. And finally, schools conduct monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. This step ensures that targets are met, resources are used efficiently, and results are documented. The findings then inform the next cycle of planning and budgeting. Now, let us take a look. Yes, so this slide presents a sample of a PBBB that is aligned with the school improvement plan and the AIP or the annual implementation plan. So PBB means that financial resources are not just allocated based on needs or availability of funds, but more importantly, based on specific performance targets and expected results. In other words, every peso spent must lead to a measurable improvement in school performance. So let us look at the structure of the table. The first column shows the SIP priority area, which represent the major development goals of the school. This includes literacy improvement, teacher quality, learner attendance, and ICT integration. These are areas usually identified through school data such as the NAT results, reading assessments, attendance records, and teacher performance reviews. The second column shows the programs or activities under the AIP. These are the concrete intervention designed to address the priority areas. The third column presents the performance indicators. These indicators define how success will be measured. And fourth column shows the targets, which are specific and measurable. The fifth column is the budget or MOOE, which shows how much funding is allocated for each program. This highlights that budgeting is directly linked to outcomes, not just an activity. And finally, the last column shows the expected results, such as improved reading proficiency, enhance teaching effectiveness, reduce absenteeism, and improve learner engagement. Overall, these slides demonstrate that in PBB, budget decisions are evidence-based, goal-oriented, and results-driven. This ensures that financial resources are used strategically to improve teaching and learning. And now, let us move to the benefits of performance-based budgeting. First, PBB aligns MOOE spending with SIP and AIP priorities. This means that school funds are no longer spent on random or disconnected activities. Instead, all expenditures are directly linked to the school's long-term and short-term plans. Second, PBB strengthens school-based management or SBM. It empowers school heads and teachers to make informed financial decisions based on real school needs. This promotes decentralization, where schools are given more responsibility and accountability over their resources. Third, PBB promotes transparency and accountability. Since each program has clear targets and indicators, it becomes easier to justify how funds are used. This also minimizes audit issues because spending is supported by documented outcomes. And fourth, PBB builds stakeholder trust. When parents, teachers, and the community see that funds are producing visible results, such as improved reading levels or better attendance, they develop greater confidence in the school leadership. So in summary, for the benefits, the major strength of PBB is that it shifts the mindset from how much money do we have to what results do we want to achieve. However, despite its advantages, PBB also faces several challenges. The first challenge is delays in fund release. The second challenge is the risk of focusing on compliance rather than real improvement. And the third challenge is uneven stakeholder involvement. So these challenges show that while PBB is technically sound, its success depends on leadership, capacity building, and school culture. And now to conclude the discussion, in the Philippine public school system, performance-based budgeting is not a separate reform, but an integral component of school-based management. When properly aligned with the SIP and AIP, PBB enables school leaders to transform limited resources into meaningful educational gains. For Filipino school heads and future education leaders, embracing PBB means exercising responsible stewardship of public funds while keeping learner success at the center of every financial decision. Ultimately, PBB strengthens the school's capacity to deliver quality, equitable, and responsive basic education in line with the DepEd's mandate. As future educational leaders, our challenge is not just to manage budgets, but to lead with purpose, accountability, and impact. So that's it about PBB. Thank you. And now let us proceed to another topic, which will be delivered by Ma'am Giselle B. De Leon, the zero-based budgeting.
Thank you, Ma'am Leslie. I am Giselle B. De Leon. I'm going to present to you the zero-based budgeting. What is zero-based budgeting or ZZB in educational institution? Zero-based budgeting approach where every expense must be justified from scratch to each budget period. Unlike traditional budgeting, ZZB does not start with last year's budget. Instead, the budget begins at zero and all programs, activities, and expenditures must prove their necessity and value. The core idea is no automatic funding. Every peso must earn its place in the budget, meaning unlike in traditional budgeting, which starts with last year's figures and adjusts them, Zero-based budgeting starts from scratch, or meaning zero-based. Every expense must be justified anew for each budgeting cycle, regardless of whether it was approved in the past. The focus is on necessity and priority, not on historical spending patterns. How zero-based budgeting works in schools. The first, start from zero. So every departments like academics, guidance, library, sports, administration assume no pre-approved budget. Each unit propose its need as if starting anew. Second, identify programs and activities. School list all activities like instructional programs, teachers' trainings, learning materials, students' services, maintenance, and projects. The third one is to justify each expenses. Every request must explain why the activity is needed, how it supports school's goals, example, learner achievement, retention, inclusivity. What happens if it is not funded? The fourth one is to evaluate the rank priorities. School heads and budgeting committees assess proposals based on alignment with DepEd goals or schools, improvement plans, impact on teaching and learning, cost, effectiveness, and lastly, allocate funds accordingly. Funds are granted only to programs that demonstrate high educational value. And what is the importance of zero-based budgeting in educational institutions? The first is to promote accountability and transparency. So it should be that each department must clearly explain how funds will be used to reduce unnecessary and redundant expenses. It should be aligned budget with educational goals, ensures spending supports educational quality, learning outcomes, and school priorities. It should be very useful when implementing reforms, new curricula, or innovative strategies. Examples, multiple exposure strategies in learning. Number 3, encourage efficient use of limited resources, particularly relevant in public schools where funds are limited. Help administrators decide which program truly make a difference. And for the fourth, it should support evidence-based decision-making. Budget proposals rely on data, performance indicators, and actual needs, not tradition or routine. So there are advantages of zero-based budgeting. The first is to eliminate wasteful spending. So zero-based budgeting requires all departments and units to justify every expenses from the ground up, rather than relying on previous budget allocations. In educational institutions, this prevents the automatic funding of programs, activities, or purchases that may no longer be relevant or effective. For example, outdated instructional materials, underutilized subscription, or repetitive trainings are scrutinized and discontinued if they do not directly contribute to learning outcomes. As a result, financial resources are used more efficiently and directed only toward activities that provide clear educational value. It encourages innovation and critical thinking among school leaders. Because VCB does not guarantee funding for traditional and long-standing programs, school leaders are encouraged to critically analyze existing practices and explore new, more effective strategies. Administrators, department heads, and teachers must think creatively about how to achieve educational goals with limited resources. This fosters innovation, such as adapted blending learning approaches, peer mentoring, or effective instructional interventions, the budgeting process itself becomes a reflective exercise that strengthens leadership skills, decision-making, and problem-solving. It also ensures equitable distribution of resources. Zero-based budgeting promotes finance fairness by allocating funds based on actual needs and priorities. Rather than historical spending patterns, in schools, this helps ensure that departments, grade levels, or learning groups with greater needs, such as remedial programs, inclusive education, or disadvantaged learners, required appropriate support. By evaluating each request or merit and impact, ZBB minimizes biases and prevents certain units from consistently receiving more funds simply because they have done so in the past. This leads to more balanced and inclusive allocation of educational resources. And lastly, for the advantage, it improves planning and evaluation of school programs. CCB strengthened both planning and evaluation by requiring school to set clear objectives, expected, expected outcomes, and performance indicators for every proposed program or activity. Budget proposal must be demonstrate how funds will be used and how success it will be measured. This practice encourages schools to regularly assess the effectiveness of their program, discontinue those with limited impact, and refine those others support students' activities. Over time, zero-based budgeting cultivates a culture of continuous improvement and evidence-based planning within the educational institution. So if we have advantages, we have also challenges in educational setting. So what are the challenges of zero-based budgeting in educational setting? The first is the time-consuming and labor-intensive. So ZZB requires school to prepare budget from scratch to every budget cycle, which involves identifying activities, justifying expenses, gathering data, and preparing detailed proposals. In educational institution, this process can be especially demanding because teachers and school heads already manage heavy workloads related to instruction, supervision, and administrative tasks. The additional time needed for consultations, reviews, and approvals may delay budget preparation and implementation, particularly in schools with limited administrative staff. The second, it requires strong leadership and planning skills. Successful implementation of ZZB depends heavily on the ability of the school leaders to plan strategically, set clear priorities, and evaluate proposals. School heads must ensure that budget decisions are aligned with the SIP, AIP, and institutional goals. Without strong leadership, ZZB may result in poorly justified proposals, inconsistent decision-making, and conflict among departments. The third one, it may be difficult for large schools with many departments. In large school or higher education institution with multiple departments, programs, and support units, ZBB can become complex and difficult to manage. Why? Because each department must submit detailed justification, increasing the volume of budget proposal that need to be reviewed and evaluated. Coordinating and consolidating this request requires robust system and clear communication and structure. Without proper coordination, the process may lead to inefficiencies, duplication of efforts, or delays in budget approval, and staff may resist due to increased paperwork. Teachers and non-teaching staff may be viewed ZBB as burdensome because it involves in additional documentation, reports, and justifications. This increased paperwork may be perceived as taking time away from teaching and other core responsibilities. Resistance may also arise from discomfort with change, fear of losing previously funded program, or lack of familiarity with budgeting processes. Without adequate orientation and support, this resistance can hinder the effective implementation of ZBB in schools. So in conclusion, the zero-based budgeting helps educational institutions spend wisely, prioritize learning needs, and ensure accountability. While it demands more effort, it is a powerful budgeting approach for schools aiming to maximize impact, especially in time of limited resources and increased educational demand. Zero-based budgeting in education ensures that every peso is spent with purpose and accountability, aligning financial resources with institutional goals and student needs. That's all. For the next presenter, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Terso Jr. T. Pablo is going to tackle program-based budgeting.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Giselle. So once again, good morning, everyone. I will be discussing program-based budgeting. So what is program-based budgeting? Program-based budgeting is a budgeting system where funds are allocated to specific program instead of traditional line item categories. Program-based budgeting is an approach that channels resources into organized programs that collectively advance institutional goals, ensuring that funding decisions emphasize purpose rather than individual expense items. It highlights the importance of demonstrating what program achieved by examining their contribution to service delivery and long-term improvement. So next is the purpose of program-based budgeting. PBB, or the program-based budgeting, aims to improve the quality of budget decisions by linking fundings to results. Program-based budgeting strengthens decision-making by directing funds towards programs that demonstrate clear contributions to institutional or national priorities and measurable public value. It ensures that resource allocation supports planned outcomes, reinforcing the connection between strategic goals, budgeting, and program performance. So next is, what are the key features of PBB, or the program-based budgeting? It determines your available capital, estimates your expenses, and help you predict income. Program-based budgeting is distinguished by its emphasis on results, requiring programs to articulate clear outputs, outcomes, and measurable performance indicators within a structured plan of activities and resources. It also promotes accountability by making program leaders responsible for meeting performance targets that are directly tied to funding decisions. So what are the benefits of program-based budgeting? PBB delivers improvements in governance, efficiency, and transparency. Program-based budgeting strengthens public financial management by making the use of funds more transparent and by requiring programs to justify their budget through measurable achievements. It also supports evidence-based decision by directing limited resource toward initiatives that demonstrate the highest educational or social impact. So next, what are the requirements for the successful implementation? Implementing PBB requires strong systems and institutional readiness. Effective implementation of program-based budgeting depends on clear communication of program goals, strong data system that generate timely and accurate performance information, and administrative routines that supporting monitoring and reporting. Research shows that when these elements are in place, as demonstrated in Florida's PBB experience, institutions are significantly more likely to implement the system successfully. So what are the challenges of program-based budgeting? Despite its benefits, PBB is difficult to implement, especially in developing contexts. Program-based budgeting is difficult to sustain because many institutions lack technical capacity, reliable data system, and operational consistency needed to design strong programs and track their performance effectively. Evidence from the research conducted in Timor-Leste also shows that weak implementation can reduce budget credibility as planned target and actual spending often fail to align. So that ends my presentation. Our next reporter will be presenting the incremental budgeting. It will be discussed by Ma'am Rhea J. P. Bakatan.
Thank you, Sir Terso. Good morning, everyone. So the next type of budgeting is incremental budgeting. So what is incremental budgeting? So it is a budgeting process based on the idea that new budget can be developed by making only marginal changes to the current budget. So in other words, with incremental budgeting, the current budget serves as a base to which incremental assumptions are added or being subtracted to determine new budget amounts. So among all budgeting methods, incremental budgeting is commonly considered the most conservative approach. So given the example, if you have 1 million budget from the previous year, so it will be increased by 2% because of inflation. So you will be have 1,020,000, and if you tend to add 50,000 for a newly hired technician, so the final budget would be 1,070,000. So why do so many organizations, especially schools and government agencies, use this method? So there are four main advantages. So we have simplicity. So this method, simplicity allows the company's management to save time on budgeting process since it uses the budget for the current period to project the future budget. It does not require complex calculations. Second, consistency and operational stability. So the reliance on figures from previous budgets ensures that budget remains fairly consistent and relatively stable over time. Third one is we have funding stability. So incremental budgeting may also help ensure that funding remains stable over time as expenses are relatively easy to project. So this can be helpful for companies with projects that requires funding for multiple years. Lastly, we have reduced internal rivalry. So incremental budgeting generally allocates equal incremental changes to the budget from one year to the next. So departments within a company are not forced into a position of competing with each other to obtain a larger portion of the budget. So we also have the disadvantages of incremental budgeting. There also are four disadvantages. First, promotes unnecessary spending. So it can result in unnecessary spending for a company. The reason behind this is that the department within a company generally tend to spend all money that they've been allocated in a budget one year in order to obtain a greater amount of money in the next budgeting period. Second, discourage innovation. So this type of budgeting may discourage the production of innovative ideas and growth since new budgets are based on figures from previous budgets. There is little room for financing of completely new ideas or activities. So the budgeting process discourages the implementation of new ideas and foster a conservative business environment. Third is fail to account for changes and external factors. So behind incremental budgets, it's constant stability of the company's operation. So the budgets are typically not responsive to potential changes that can result from unforeseen circumstances or some unanticipated factors. Lastly, we have lack an incentive for comprehensive review. So the stability of incremental budgets does not provide any incentives to the company's management for reviewing its budgets with view to realizing savings in expenditures. So the lack of review process makes budgets vulnerable to waste and adequate assumptions and mistakes. So now, despite this drawbacks, no, incremental budgeting is widely used. So if your schools or organization choose this method, here's how to do it well. So we have 7 steps. First, we have review last year's budgets. Um, Second, identify areas for adjustments. Third, factor in external influences. Step 4 is consult department heads. Then step 5, apply adjustments. Step 6, review and finalize. And step 7, monitor and evaluate. So even after the budget is implemented, keep an eye on how it's performing. Regular monitoring allows you to make mid-year corrections. So um, generally, incremental budgeting is best applied only if you are confident that the school's budgets will remain stable in long term with only minimal changes. So in other cases, if it is recommended to use more sophisticated budgeting techniques. So that's all for incremental budgeting. So our next reporter will be Mom Clares Fe Enriquez, who will discuss the activity-based budgeting.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Maria. And once again, good day, everyone. I will be the one to discuss the next budgeting style, which is activity-based budgeting. And now we'll look at how this budgeting style can help schools in the Philippines to use limited funds more wisely. So, what is ABB? So, to simply put everything, ABB or activity-based budgeting means creating your budget based on the specific activities you plan to do. So, instead of just listing items like supplies or training in your budget, you list the actual events or programs. So, ABB helps us spot waste because we can cut it and use the money for something more useful. So the important thing to note about ABB is that it is not coming from new or extra money. It is simply a new way of organizing and spending the funds we already get from our quarterly maintenance and other operating expenses, or our MOOE, on debt and priorities. So we can actually source out the money from our MOOE, our PTA, and LGU support. So we are just reorganizing our existing allocation with ABB. So next is how to implement ABB. Now, the first thing to do is to identify activities tied to Philippine school goals. For example, Brigada Eskwela cleanup or SPED training. Then the next one is that we need to figure out the cost. We need to map the cost drivers, the materials, the staff time. For example, if we'll be having volunteers for that activity, we'll need to make sure that if there are volunteers, or there be any other way that we can compensate their effort. So we may be taking consideration like how about the snacks. So we really need to put that into consideration and how much we will give for that. Then we will need to estimate needs and allocate from DepEd grants or PTA funds. Then, of course, the most important thing to do is that we need to track our spending and review. So we can use Excel for that. Then afterwards, after the activity, we can also take a look like what is the result of that activity. Does it help, for example, our target improvement for the school? And also, we need to take a look of our compliance to RA 9155 as well. So here we have a note, actually at the end you can see this is just an example of how we can create ABB or implement ABB using our maintenance or MOOE, which is we have here the 80-20 rule. So 80% you can allocate that one for your ABB activities that would drive matatag pillars, for example, improving literacy, numeracy, and attendance performance of the students. And the remaining 20%, then you can put it under traditional line item budgeting. So we have also here another example. As you can see here in our table, we have an activity here, 3 sample activities. Of course, these are just suggestions. You can actually make your own line of activities when you create your ABB. Then, of course, for each activity, you can have the school goal, then the cost drivers, then the budget allocated for that, then what's your expected output that each of the activity could bring to your school performance. Then you can make it like for first quarter, you total everything, how much will be the budget, and what are the activities that you will need to implement on that quarter. So here in our example, we have 50,000. That 50,000 already covers 3 activities. All right. So next is we have the benefits and the challenges of ABB. So for the benefits of ABB, of course, it helps us reduce waste. It also forces us to think that if this activity is it really worth it, and it also helps us spend more on things that actually improve learning. However, of course, in every type of budgeting style, there are really challenges that we would encounter. The first thing is that yes, ABB implementing this one could take time and training, specifically if the school is understaffed. Then the next one is it can be hard for small or rural schools, specifically if they are only given with small budgets. So that could affect the way they would handle the activities and then how they would budget the amount that they are given. And then the next one, of course, the risk of mistakes. No, risk of errors or principals lack accounting skills. I think it's not new for everybody. There are actually principals, school heads, sorry, that were tagged of money concerns or problems. No, it is really important that we need to have something as documentation where we can track everything. Where did the money go, so that when questions would arise, we can show something to our stakeholders, like what really happened to the money. Then, of course, to sum up everything about ABB, we can say that it is useful to help us get the most out of our limited school funds. It pushes us to focus on DepEd goals and not just on any other activity that we would want to implement on the school. Now, to give us like a very clear overview of the differentiation of these types of budgeting, since my colleagues already discussed the different types of budgeting and I'm the one who actually tasked to discuss the last one, maybe we can take a look on those type of budgeting in answering these questions. For line item, it actually focused on what do we need to buy. For the incremental budgeting, it actually focuses on how much did we spend last time. And then for zero-based budgeting, maybe we can ask this question: do we need to spend this at all? And then for activity-based budgeting, we need to ask the question, what activities would best help for our students? Then the performance-based budgeting discussed earlier, actually that is another piece or another side of the coin together with ABB, because PBB is a report card of ABB. So they're actually connected. So that's how we can actually take a look of how are they different, how do we can differentiate all of them, because we are talking a lot of like budgeting things here, and it seems like they are the same, but it actually differs in how they focus on or what are their focuses and why they need to be implemented. So my recommendation for everything is that we can implement ABB maybe taking small steps at a time. Now we can just pilot it and just 2 to 3 activities, then let's see the results if it could really help improve our schools. So that's it for ABB, and my references are here. So next in line is the discussion of the results of the case study, and that will be tackled by Ma'am Jayan Coronacion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Clares. Good day, everyone. I am Jay Anti Coronacion, and today I will present a case study on resource dependency and adaptive strategies in MOE budgeting within a secondary school implementing unit. Next slide, please. Across many contexts, schools face persistent budgeting challenges due to limited funding and reliance on external allocations. International reports from UNESCO, OECD, and the World Bank highlight how these constraints challenge effective financial management and restrict opportunities to improving learning outcomes. In the Philippine setting, this reality is particularly evident. Secondary schools under the Department of Education manage their maintenance and other operating expenses, or MOE, yet allocations are often insufficient and tightly regulated, leaving administrators with little flexibility in resource use. To frame this study, resource dependency theory by Pfeffer and Salanchik was used. This theory emphasizes that organizations rely on external resources and must adapt to constraints imposed by their environment. In our case, schools develop strategies to cope with their dependence on government allocations. Now, to answer this, there are 3 guide questions. Number 1, what resource-related difficulties does a school encounter in budgeting and utilizing MOE funds? Second, what coping mechanisms are employed to adapt to resource scarcity? And third, what insights can be drawn to inform policy and practice? In this study, a qualitative single case design was used. Data were gathered through a semi-structured interview with the head of procuring entity, the official responsible for financial management and procurement. The interview was transcribed and analyzed thematically using Broad and Clark's six-phase approach. And for the results, the findings revealed two major constraints. First is structural dependency. The school's autonomy is limited by its complete reliance on centralized funding. The MOE allocation is the sole lifeline with no alternative revenue streams. Second is absorption to scarcity. That talks about the challenges experienced by the school. Fixed costs such as utilities and contracted services consume most of the budget. This pre-spending leaves little room for educational initiatives or improvements. Other bureaucratic mandates also further divert scarce funds. For the third theme, it highlights what we call adaptive buffering. Schools introduce procedural innovations like quarterly cash flow budgeting and back or bids and awards committee led initiatives. This also tactically used local funds to create a financial cushion for unexpected needs. The fourth theme emphasizes lessons from dependency. Resilience is achieved through prioritization, stakeholder support, and advocacy for policy reform. Recommendations including separating personal costs into plantilla positions, assigning capital expenditure funds, and simplifying procurement systems. These measures aim to reconfigure the dependency relationship itself. And for the conclusion and recommendations. In conclusion, the study strongly supports resource dependency theory. It shows that effective MOE management is not just a technical task, but a continuous process of adaptation within a rigid system of resource dependence. For researchers, future studies should examine funding models that grant principals more spending control. For policymakers, reforms such as separating personal costs, creating capital funds, and streamlining procurement should be piloted. And for school leaders, adaptive resource management and stakeholder networking must be integrated into leadership development programs. In closing, the study illustrates both challenges and resilience of schools operating under resource dependency. By recognizing constraints and developing adaptive strategies, schools can sustain operations while advocating for systemic reforms and that better align resources with educational needs. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much to all the members of group number 3 for the very comprehensive discussion of the different types of budgeting in educational institution. And as we wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, let us remember that the type of budgeting we adopt, whether line item, performance-based, or zero-based, shapes how effectively we translate plans into meaningful outcomes of our learners. May this discussion guide us in making more strategic, transparent, and learner-centered financial decisions in our decisions or in our institutions. Thank you so much and good morning to everyone. Bye.